Okay, hi everyone. I'm Ann Russo, and I'm a professor in Women's and Gender Studies at DePaul University. And the presentation today is part of my WGS 391 Methods and Scholarship in Women's and Gender Studies. And we're very excited and honored to have Dr. Francesca T. Royster here with us today. Dr. Royster is a professor in the English department at DePaul University. She's also part of the LGBTQ studies program. She's written scholarly work on Shakespeare, Black lesbian country music bands, Prince, and Fela Kuti on Broadway, among other topics. Her books include Becoming Cleopatra, The Shifting Image of an Icon, Sounding Like a No-No, Queer Sounds and Eccentric Acts in the Post-Soul Era, and a book that's coming out in the fall, Black Country Music, Listening for Revolutions, some of which you read for today. And she also has another book coming out in the fall, Choosing Family, a memoir of queer motherhood and Black resistance. And that will be coming out from Abrams Press in the fall. Her recent special issue of the Journal of Popular Music Studies was on the futures of country music, Uncharted Country, that was co-edited with Nadine Hubbs. It won the 2021 Ruth Soley Award from the American Musicological Society. Her creative work has appeared in the anthologies Untangling the Knot, Queer Voices on Marriage, Relationships, and Identity, and also a book called Queer Praxis, as well as in the journals Feminist Studies, Slag Glass City, LA Review of Books, the Huffington Post, the Windy City Times, and Chicago Literati. So I hope you will please welcome Dr. Francesca Royster. Yay. We'll turn it over to Francesca.
Thank you. Thanks for that wonderful introduction, Annie. And I'll just say out there, of course, Annie's my partner. So, I'll just be referring to Annie throughout. And that is the Annie. It's your Annie, but I can also call you Dr. Russo if you'd like. So, um, I'm just so honored to be here and to talk to you all. I've heard a lot about all of your projects actually, just in our breakfast table conversations and brainstorming, and I'm so excited to be in conversation with you and to share my work. And also, because I've been on leave this year, I am just really, really missing talking to students. So I'm really excited to have the chance to talk and just kind of brainstorm and hear more about your own thoughts about things. So, um, I am excited to talk about methods in scholarship, but I don't know if I really have a method. Although I kind of like to think of my method as the visual version of my method as a cat trying to get out of a wet paper bag. At least that's what writing feels like to me. But to tell you the truth, part of my kind of investment in being a scholar is a way of kind of thinking, the pleasure of thinking, and the pleasures of theorizing that Bell Hooks has written so much about, especially in her book Oppositional Gaze. And as I've grown as a scholar, and now I'm at least 25 years out of graduate school, I've had more of a chance to kind of center pleasure and joy and curiosity in the way that I go about when I'm writing about and thinking about and teaching. And that's partly made even more possible by having tenure and kind of working in the the privileges of a standard academic track. So I know that part of my method is informed by some degree of privilege and safety. So I was just thinking about that today as I was jotting things down. But I have also put in my time in some kind of not very joyful spaces and learned through the process of that too. Like, what is it that I really want to spend my life doing and writing about? So part of my method also is this, just like a journal, and I'm really very much beholden to Julia Cameron and her project, the Artist's Way, her book, The Artist's Way. and especially her kind of method of creativity in terms of kind of tapping into the creative force or life force, what she calls the creative life force, um, through journaling and especially the morning pages. And I depend a lot about on that book. I've kind of adapted Julia Cameron a little bit, so sometimes I do or don't get to 3 pages a day, which is I think you're supposed to do 8.5 by 11 pages, and I have this little small notebook instead. But I also have a wanted list and a to-do list that's like kind of a master to-do list. And in the back of the book, I'm just always listing the things that slip to the side of my consciousness or things that I hear and see that I want to check out more. So it might be books or it might be podcasts that I want to listen to or shows, but it's sort of like a way for me to kind of engage in the fast world of popular culture in a way that doesn't make me anxious because I feel like I have this hardbound, paper thing that is charting where I could go next. So that kind of helps keep me open and also grounded. So in my own thinking, I really call a lot on the tenets of Afrofuturism, which is kind of the idea of um, kind of Black centered dreaming about the future. That's also very much grounded in the past and an investment in the present world. So, kind of thinking, looking forwards and backwards, being historically grounded, but also interested in the fantastical or utopian. Really feeling and caring about what you are writing and thinking about, and thinking collectively as well as about yourself and whatever you're doing. So to me, the best symbol of that is, or not the best, but one of them is when Parliament and Funkadelic kind of came up with their costumes, they have a lot of these homemade things that they grabbed, and sometimes they're dirty, like a dirty diaper or an old bed sheet or other things. So there's kind of this combination of homemade and outrageously fantastic that and sparkly and glittery that I think is also part of my own aesthetic. And with that, I'm also interested in queer world making. So kind of thinking about that for myself and others. And by that I mean, how do we? One reason I've always been drawn to popular culture is to think about how we use art, different forms of art, to dream of the future that we want and to make the world that we want, and to connect to other people who are also dissatisfied. Sorry, Hamilton just went in my head, but sorry. Okay. Anyway, so let's see. Annie just shared this great quote with me from Octavia Butler, and I really like it a lot. And I'm not sure if she's shared it with you too, and she might have. But Octavia Butler once said, "Every story I write adds to me a little, changes me a little, forces me to re-examine an attitude or belief, causes me to research and learn, helps me to understand people and grow." And this idea of really kind of thinking about the process of writing as an experiment, but also as a way of learning and pushing one's own boundaries, I think is really important. Like not in a yucky way, but just in a way that is really challenging yourself and your own thinking. So I'll say a little bit about my trajectory. And if at any point anybody wants to ask me a question or ask me to clarify something as I ramble on, please stop me, and then I'm happy to talk in the middle of this. But so I started out in my academic life as a Shakespeare scholar, and some of that had to do with just the situation that I was in. I went to as an undergraduate to Kansas State, which was the university that my dad taught English in initially, and I could go for like $400 or something a year in order to, get my education. So I was there, and the English department that I got kind of drawn into was really strong in the traditional disciplines like traditional canonical literatures, including Shakespeare. And they had like some really creative professors who were teaching Shakespeare, including Don Hedrick, who was one of my mentors throughout, who is this Marxist, feminist Shakespeare scholar who was really interested in performance. But I kind of got caught up in Shakespeare. I took like maybe 6 classes in Shakespeare studies as an undergraduate in total from different teachers and different perspectives. And originally, I wanted to write an honors thesis on Toni Morrison and Leslie Marmon Silko and kind of um, ideas of the future in their work. But my dad was the only person who taught Toni Morrison, and I didn't want to write a master's thesis. I write an honors thesis with him because that would be too much pressure. And the professor who taught Native American literature had left. So I was like, okay, I'll write about Queen Elizabeth and cross dressing. So that's what I ended up doing. And kind of looking at a rhetorical analysis of Queen Elizabeth. And I found that being interested in Shakespeare's studies as a Black woman gave me a kind of a visibility, and was a way. It had kind of a, I guess, for better word, like a respectability politics to it that helped me to be kind of stealth because I've always been a little bit out there. Um, even before I called myself queer or had that language, I've always been queer. And so there was this discipline or like subdiscipline that had a kind of recognition and cachet. And so doing weird things with Shakespeare was sort of a way to um, make people uncomfortable but comfortable at the same time. And I recognize now, like, 30 years later, that that was part of what was operating and being drawn to Shakespeare. But I've also really loved, I love the weirdness of live performance and the way that kind of being in the now and the embodied aspects of theater always creates this sense of possibility. And I always like thinking about the ways that there are plays on the page, but there's so much more happening in the world that influences the way that a play works. And that can be sometimes surprising or uncomfortable or unexpected or weird. And so I always was interested in that sense of possibility also that went with Shakespeare, even though it's also like, the literature that your English teacher wants you to be excited about as well. So I ended up writing about Shakespeare and race. Um, and that was what my dissertation was about. It's called Shakespeare's Racial Others. And I had as my committee what I think of as my dream team. It was like the most outrageous collection of people that you could have in this field. Um, so I had Janet Edelman, who's a professor of psychoanalytic feminism, and she writes a lot about, or she has passed away since, but she wrote a lot about breastfeeding and Shakespeare, a lot of like Macbeth and Lady Macbeth dashing the infant away. Um, from her breast. And she herself was just like really kooky and really out there. She's kind of this amazing, charismatic figure. And she wrote these really smart analyses, kind of thinking about the psychologies of motherhood and mother infant relations and desire. And that wasn't my own framework, but there's something about her out there-ness that really appealed to me. Um, Also on my committee was Alfred Artiega, who was a poet um, as well as a Shakespeare scholar, and he kind of combined Latinx culture with kind of new historicism, which was the trendy theory of that time. I think people are still doing new historicism, but they might not call it that. But the tenets of new historicism really rely on the writings of Foucault and others, kind of really thinking about power and the circulation of power, and self fashioning and the ways that people traffic in power through writing. I think that's kind of the idea. So Alfred was this again like a really great young professor and someone who I think was also trying to combine being a creative writer, being a cultural theorist of Latinx studies, and being a Shakespeare scholar. And so I thought, oh well, he's really interesting, and he would be a great reader. And then Barbara Christian was my third reader. And Barbara Christian is like an icon of Black feminist studies. She wrote a really powerful essay called The Race for Theory back when I was in graduate school, which was really questioning why do we theorize? Why and who are we writing for? And also how she's really putting forth the idea that um, folks of color, Black women, and other disenfranchised folks are theorizing in their everyday, and that as scholars, we should seek to center those lived experiences. So I really see in her perspective um, kind of also the influence of this bridge called My Back and and women of color feminism, but for her case, in her case, Black feminism. So she was also, as a scholar, just like an amazing survivor. She was the first Black feminist theorist and in her department, and eventually founded African American Studies at Berkeley, which is where I was. And she was just incredibly tough minded and had seen a lot. And so I really learned a lot from having her in my corner. And also in writing my dissertation and writing about Shakespeare, she also always reminded me to also bring in these other knowledges that I had, that it was okay to bring in all my different selves and to, really place myself in my work. So anyway, so eventually, so I kept working in Shakespeare after I graduated and um, was a newly minted professor. And my first job was at Penn State, and I was hired as a twofer, which was really problematic. But I was hired to be um, a Shakespeare scholar and to cover the bases of African American literature as well, which I wasn't trained in really, but I read deeply and throughout my life. So, and also to mentor all the students of color and to be on a billion committees. So um, it created this kind of double standard, unfortunately, with me and the other person that I was also hired with. So basically, the university got a line in Shakespeare studies, and they were able to hire him and also hire me because I can't remember what the phrase was then, if it was a target hire. But anyway, but they were really getting the most out of me that they could. And sometimes it felt like they weren't asking the same things of my dear colleague who was on the same level as I was. But I digress. Um, so, as I was there and I was working on trying to figure out how to turn my dissertation into a book, I had on my computer hard drive this other dream project, which I called the Tina Eartha Grace Project. And I really wanted to write about Grace Jones, Tina Turner, and Eartha Kitt. And I thought if I can just get past this hump of like getting my credentials, I want to write about these figures who are so inspiring to me and to me speak to what it means to be a Black woman and kind of survival and creativity. So when I wrote my book on Cleopatra, I was kind of thinking about them in my head. I was thinking about representations of women of color and of the desirable exotic other. But I was also thinking about the ways that creative people also take what they've been given and invent new things. So half of the book is about kind of the history of Cleopatra as an icon, and then half of it is about appropriations and kind of new work that people have made kind of using this icon of Cleopatra in the process. So eventually that work gave me the chance to jump out of Shakespeare studies. I'd had just kind of enough. It was a source of anxiety for me, and part of it had to do with the gatekeeping of scholarship in the most traditional and most recognized journals. So, I did get my one article in Shakespeare Quarterly, which, is the whatever flagship journal. And I just was like, you know what? This is not my audience. This isn't who I want to speak to. This isn't what I want to write about. And how do so basically I had to think about like, what was it that I wanted to make and create? And how do I remake myself as a scholar? So part of the way I did that was to really think about the art that meant the most to me when I was growing up, which was music. I grew up in a household where where my dad played music, played live music, and we had instruments everywhere. He was a percussionist, and we had like we always had like a gourd hanging and drying somewhere, and um, African and Afro-Cuban instruments and all kinds of music. Um, and also for myself, playing music was a way to move and think about different kinds of spaces and ways to be. So I taught myself how to write about music by reading a lot of music criticism and reviews. Some theorists that I really love who inspired me um, were Daphne Brooks, who's an amazing kind of American studies person. We actually knew each other in school, and she both writes for, like Rolling Stone or well, I don't think she wrote for Cream, but like the popular press, and is also an amazing scholar. And part of what I really admire about her is that she writes in a very historically grounded way, but is able to translate that work to lots of different audiences. So I started reading around. I started going to different kinds of conferences and spaces where different kinds of writers were writing about the things that I cared about, writing about music and performance, but not necessarily just for academic audiences. And then I also started learning instruments, and I'd had music lessons as a kid. My parents made me learn piano, but I decided to learn um, the upright bass to kind of get at the bass because the bass is so important to funk and soul and jazz. And eventually, I've learned also how to play the banjo, and that's been part of my country music scholarship. So I took a lot of creative writing classes as well, and really wanted to think about methods to bring in my own stories and storytelling um, and together with my theorizing. And some of that is because I think that the musicians that I was looking at, really make themselves vulnerable in their art. I have a lot of respect for creatives of all kinds, and there's a way that they're really putting themselves on the line. And I wanted to add memoir and creative writing in part to honor that, and also to participate in the process of creativity in the best way I could. Not a very good musician, and I have a terrible singing voice. But I am a good listener and I'm a good fan. So, anyway, I really have been working on creating a memoir, a memoir, voice of memoir that can also theorize and talk about the felt embodied experience of music and performances that I'm writing about. Okay, and then as I was, one of my classes that I was taking, as I was teaching myself different things, was a video making class. Um, and in the video making class, I decided that I wanted to write or make a film about a family homestead. My great grandmother had this boarding house in Bronzeville, and I spent time in it as a kid before it was torn down. And I was facing what to do with the fact that the house didn't physically exist anymore. It's now a vacant lot and part of the IIT campus. And that really got me thinking a lot about absences and how absence, how this process of tearing things down, gentrification, erasure, historical revision, is really informing the music and other form literature and other forms of art that interest me too. And so my own family story also includes these moments of gaps or erasures or things that have been lost. And that realization that I could write about the experience of of erasure and remaking or creativity has kind of set me off on the projects that I've been most preoccupied with right now. So my Black Country Music project is partly about like how artists have made home in the face of um, appropriation, loss, caricature, and theft in terms of music, and and also thinking about how effectively Black people have been erased from country to the extent that it's seen as an aberration to be a Black person interested in country music. So that because I'm always trying to look for projects that part of me doesn't really want to do. Um, I found myself writing about country. And then my memoir is also about creating spaces in the face of loss of home and protection, and this story of adoption that centers my daughter, Cece, is partly acknowledging and wrestling with the way that adoption always is connected to loss of a family, and different ways that, in our case, through open adoption and through building a chosen family, we've tried to wrestle with those experiences of loss. Um, yeah, so I my biggest one of my biggest influences, Jose Munoz writes in his book Cruising Utopia. Queerness is not yet here. Queerness is a longing that propels us onward, beyond romances of the negative and toiling in the present. Queerness is the thing that lets us feel that the world is not enough, that indeed something is missing. And I love that idea that it lets us feel, because I think that the world, our society kind of pressures us not to acknowledge or feel the things that have been taken from us or stolen, but to kind of move on and get with the program. And I love the ways that music can return us to those experiences. Sometimes feelings that we can't articulate, but also to tap into histories and roots that might have been severed, or also to kind of enter into the experiences and try to understand the experiences of others. So I try to capture all of that in my writing. So I've talked a lot, and I still haven't really talked about method, but part of my method is definitely, in terms of writing about music, trying to bring together through an interdisciplinary lens different ways that people break down the ways that music operates and works, whether it's the structural aspects of music and sound, the technological parts, the performative parts, the visual aspects of performance, um, or kind of the traditions that people are drawing from and what they're making. So that means that I read around a lot. I buy CDs, even though and sometimes albums, even though we're in the world of the digital, because to me it gives me an artifact to jump off of. It gives me an image to think about, how the music is being sold. It gives me liner notes, like in this case, this is an artist who was making music in the early 1960s, Elza Suarez. um, and I have the liner notes that they were writing for the original album. So it's like a really interesting historic moment. Of course, it wasn't on CD, but but I think having those artifacts is also kind of important. And I brought out a lot of books that have influenced me in terms of my thinking. But for sure, I mentioned Munoz, but also Black queer theorist E. Patrick Johnson, who talks about queerness and the ways that that folks of color have created a version of queerness that speaks to their everyday lives. Um, and the Afrofabulations, which is a book of about critical fabulation by Tavia Nyong'o. Um, his work and the work of Sadia Hartman look at gaps in the archive and ways that creativity and imagination sometimes have to be a tool of inquiry when the material artifacts of a history have been lost or erased. And I love Daphne Brooks's book, Liner Notes for the Revolution. I think it is. Wait, hold on. Let's grab. Okay. She just wrote this book, Liner Notes for the Revolution, The Intellectual Life of Black Feminist Sound. In her theory, I really love the way that she's interested in thinking about musicians as fans of one another, musicians as theorists. So through their music making, they're also theorizing about history, the lived conditions that they're encountering, their ideas about the future, their participation in movements, and the ways that that triad of fan, musician or artist, and critic can sometimes be multiply, those are positions that can be multiply held. And that, in fact, bringing those things together is a very Black feminist kind of thing. And one of the people that she focuses on that was really unexpected. She writes a lot about a billion musicians from, the turn of the century through the turn of the last century to the turn of this century. Um, but she writes about Zora Neale Hurston, who is an anthropologist as well as novelist, of course, and who also, when she was encountering the folks who she was most inspired by, she would learn stories and songs by singing them herself. And there are these recordings of her trying to perform the music that she was also studying as an anthropologist. And she wasn't a terrible singer, but she wasn't a great singer. But there's something about the ways um, that she really kind of created, put herself in a position of vulnerability and risk to think through the process of creative production by putting herself there, that I think is really valuable and important. And that is something that I also really try to think about as I'm writing and try to do to the extent that I can. So I have a million books that I've also brought down with me, but let's see. That um, I guess maybe I'll stop and see if you have any questions or. Oh, I wanted to actually show you a little bit of some of the films before we turn to questions. Some of the music that gets me excited right now, and just to talk a little bit about things that are happening if we have a minute. So does that sound okay? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Forgot to, oops, hold it. I have to share the screen, right? Uh-oh, wait a minute. Okay, give me a moment.
Oh, do I have to make you
Oh,
a co-host?
yeah. Yeah, do you mind doing that, Annie?
Oh,
Okay, hold on. And I
yeah,
lost,
you're now a co-host.
okay. Sorry, I lost our Zoom. Come back. I know I'm here because I can hear myself. Okay, hold on.
It's hard. Do you have a million windows open?
Yes. Here I am. Hi. Okay. All right. Let me try this. Okay. And if it doesn't work, then I will do something else. Okay. So I just pulled up a little bit of Brittany Howard's Stay High. And this is the song that I wrote about in my in one of the essays that you read. Um, oh, but where is it? I don't see it anymore. Did I lose it?
It's the next one over.
Okay.
Oh, oh, I think you can press it right on there.
You might have to exit out of the share
Uh,
screen and then click on it and then share that screen again.
Did you hear that, Franny? Oh, yeah. Oh, we can't hear you.
Okay, you couldn't hear me, but I just said, thank you, brilliant people. And just a second. Give me one moment. Okay. Okay, I'm back.
Okay.
Oh, okay. There we go. No. Where are you?
That's so weird.
That's so strange, isn't
Oh,
it?
there you are.
Okay.
That should work.
Yeah, it'll work. Um, it's just it keeps losing my things. Oh wait, there we go. There we go. Okay, I got it. Okay. Is everybody good?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So here's Brittany Howard, and this is from her album Jamie from 2019, and her song Stay High. So we'll watch a little bit of it.
I already feel
Okay. So everybody can hear me, right? Yeah. So I love this song so much, and part of what I love about it is the way it uses nostalgia and the kind of recent past, the way the recent past is marked through the technology, through the seat belts, the fashions of the folks, and so you really get this sense of space, this Alabama space that Howard grew up in. And there's a way that she's looking backwards, but also thinking about an elsewhere, like through the voice of her father, who is lip syncing to her voice. So it's also just really interesting that way as well. But I love kind of this idea of just everyday conspiracies of joy that are happening in this town in this video. And it is, it's an imagined situation, but also one that's real. Um, and so that sense of possibility, I think, is really, really cool in the music itself. And also the kind of the drive of the rhythm as this kind of sense of time that's inescapable, but can also be tricked in. And so, okay, so that's a little bit of Brittany Howard. Um, with Blanco Brown, I remember going to a conference and someone suggested, when you're writing about music, to turn down the sound and to watch, if you're writing about a music video, um, to turn down the sound and just see what's happening with the images and see separately together with the music what both of those things yield. I didn't do that for Bronco Brown, but I think that there's something so irresistible about the force of this song that um, sometimes it was challenging to write about it because it I want the best for them and for this song, and I want to believe in the image of togetherness and unity that the song is enacting. So let's see. So here's Blanco, and I wrote about this song in my introduction to my Black country music book. And I'm just gonna go backwards. I'm trying to cheat the ads. We'll just watch a little bit of it. I just need you to get real loose. Get comfortable. Grab your loved ones or grab your love partner. And if you're by yourself, no worries. Just follow after me. Gonna do the two-step and cowboy boogie. Grab a sweetheart and spin out with me. Hold down and get into it. Take it to the left now and dip with it. Gonna throw down, take a sip with it and lean back. Put your head up, stand it. Let's have some fun. To the left now. To the right. Now take your left hand and put it on your side. Gonna roll your shoulders. Do the slip and slide. This next part's my favorite part of this time to shine. Gonna do the two-step and cowboy boogie. Grab a sweetheart and spin out with me. Hold down and get into it. Take it to the left now and dip with it. Gonna throw down, take a sip with it and lean back. Put your head percentage. It's simple, you can do it. Slide to the left, slide to the right. Now cool down, have a good time. Slide to the left, slide to the right. Do the butterfly, have a good time. Round, round, round and round you go. It's Okay, sorry. Actually, I didn't mean to play that much of the song, but I was just getting into it. But yeah, so I was really interested in the imagination of space and Blanco Brown navigating the space through dance. And I think it's interesting also that it's both kind of digital space and real or imagined real space as well. Um, and then I'll show a little bit of a kind of documentary from Our Native Daughters album, Songs of Our Native Daughters, and the making of that album with Rhiannon Giddens. And when I was writing and thinking about this music, I was thinking about the way that the song sounds and the story that it's telling, as well as the process, and even the, the iconicity of Rhiannon Giddens herself, who, if at least in certain circles, is just like, you cannot question Rhiannon Giddens. She has a kind of moral authority and respect that a lot of the artists that I was writing about in the Black Country Project yearn for. So yeah, so I was really also thinking about how she's using her own power, and how you can see it in the video to tell a hard story. So I just will show a little bit from this.
I have a question about the end.
Yeah. Oh wait, hold on. Shall I stop sharing? Yeah, what's up? Oh, does someone have a question?
Yeah, it sounded like somebody said something, but I don't think they did. Did somebody say something?
No. Okay. Okay, sorry. Here we go. Okay, are we back on the video? Is everybody with me? Okay.
Because it says, and she can't come down, and she won't come down. And then when you're saying mom is flying free and repeating that, should we alternate, and she can't come down, and she won't come down?
Yeah,
or,
I think so.
Yeah, just keep on alternating that.
Okay. Yeah, because there's that kid feel in the lead line, you know. It's like, why is she? I just like imagine him going, why, why isn't she saying anything? When like she's in the tree, like he just doesn't understand. You know, why isn't she coming down? Mama's crying long, and she can't get up. Mama's crying long, and she can't get up. Mama's hands are shaking, and she can't get up. Mama's hands are shaking, and she can't get up. Mama's running hard from the boss's man. Mama's running hard from the boss's man. Called her anyway, the boss's man. Called her anyway, the boss's man. They lie on the ground again and again. They lie on the ground again and again. I can hear her screaming again and again. I can hear her screaming again and again. Mama's crying long, and she can't get up. Mama's crying long, and she can't get up. Mama's hands are shaking, and she can't get up. Mama's hands are shaking, and she can't get up. It was late at night when she got the knife. It was late at night when she got the knife. She went to his room when she got the knife. She went to his room when she got the knife. Mama's dress is red. It was white before. Mama's dress is red. It was white before. Lift it up and see. It was white before. Lift it up and see. It was white before. Mama's crying long, and she can't get up. Mama's crying long, and she can't get up. Mama's hands are shaking, and she can't get up. Mama's hands are shaking, and she can't get up. All the men have come, and they brought the rope. All the men have come, and they brought the rope. They came here for mama, and they brought the rope. They came here for mama, and they brought the rope. Mama's crying long, and she can't get up. Mama's crying long, and she can't get up. Mama's hands are shaking, and she can't get up. Mama's hands are shaking, and she can't get up. Mama's in a tree, and she can't come down. Mama's in a tree, and she won't come down. Mama's flying free, and she can't come down. Mama's flying free, and she won't come down. Mama's flying free, and she can't come down. Mama's flying free, and she won't come down. Mama's flying free, and she can't come down. Mama's flying free.
Okay. So as a writer, I found, especially with that video and that whole album, the need to kind of think about my own place in the music, And there's something about our Native daughters and Rhiannon Giddens' work that's really trying to think about the past, but also like the challenges um, of Black people right now. And somehow in the video, I think the attention to the process and their physical presence also reminds us of that nowness and the inheritance or the wake of slavery and enslavement that's informing the song. So I'd love to hear your own responses or any questions that you might have for me, and I am happy to, um, yeah, tell you more things that I'm listening to right now, if you want as well.
Well,
Yeah,
first,
and
thank you so much. I think we could first thank you and then take a deep breath and then open it up for questions.
thank you. Yeah. Sorry, that was kind of an intense song to end on, so I should have done it in the reverse. So,
Um, I have a question, if that's okay, if everyone's ready for that.
yeah.
I was wondering, while I was reading your work, if you envision at all like how people are reading it in combination with listening to the music, like with you and in the piece about Brittany Howard, you said you were listening to her as you were writing, and so I was like listening as I was reading after that, and I was kind of, yeah, just thinking, is it, I don't know, yeah, do you have any ideas if it's better to come to the reading with knowing some of the music or coming to the music later after doing the reading or in between?
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Thanks for that question, Liza. That I really, I think that there is no one way to enter into the reading, though I try to at least leave enough breadcrumbs so that if you wanted to know what I'm talking about, then you could go back. And that's why I love like live links because you can actually stop what you're reading and listen. And that would be great. But that's actually one of the challenges of writing about music because unless you're writing about something that's very obscure, sometimes it's a danger to overwrite because you're wanting to analyze the music, but you're also wanting and bring people into the music, but you're also acknowledging the fact that anyone has access to a lot of the music. So yeah, it's something that I kind of struggle with myself, but I love in my ideal audience someone is reading and listening at the same time and then maybe going back and listening again. Um, and often the music that I'm writing about are I often do write about songs that people have heard often. So I kind of like the idea of re-listening to something that you know already. But whenever I'm writing, I also try to listen to the music in different situations. Like I might listen to it in my headphones with my computer going, or I'll listen to it in space, like in the space of my house, maybe even in a different room to see what I notice, or I listen to it with Cece to see what she notices, and I talk to her about things. She's like my important co-writer in whatever I'm writing these days. But yeah, but I love thinking about different ways of listening while you're writing or reading.
Thank you.
Sure.
I had a question um, about, so especially with music, I think it like is applicable to anything. But I feel like there's a lot of different interpretations of music. I guess there's like a lot of different interpretations of everything. But I was wondering because like something I'm struggling with is like how do you validate like your interpretation of something and like incorporating theory based off of that, like especially with something like music that can have such like a wide array of interpretations.
Yeah, it's really daunting, isn't it? That was something that I also encountered with Shakespeare studies because it's, art that has been around for a long time. A lot of people have written about it. A lot of people have strong opinions about it. And maybe I'm kind of attracted to things that people have strong, maybe even like bifurcating, opposite end, conflictual opinions about. So it is hard to kind of present yourself as both open but authoritative and convincing. And to tell you the truth, that is one reason that I think owning up to my own biases and kind of really deep personal connections to what I'm writing about is one way that I kind of try to persuade my view of things, because I'm really not writing about the truth. I'm trying to write about a truth. um, but I also like really find powerful reading histories of music cultures. Josh Gameson wrote, who's a sociologist, wrote this great book about the disco artist Sylvester. And as a sociologist, he was both writing a biography about a person, but also about the communities that Sylvester performed in and performed with, and really thinking collectively about the impact of Sylvester's music. So I think that that's another way to present an argument about music, is to also consider that music is shared and has functions in different kinds of spaces. But I love to be right as much as the next person, but I do feel like that's something that's what's so powerful about art, is that it people feel deep senses of ownership and rightness. And my some of my colleagues would disagree with me that there isn't a right answer to interpretation, but that's definitely my starting place. And maybe that's my postmodernist training. But I do think that there are things about the properties of any work of art that you're describing, like whether it's like thinking about the language or the way that things look on the page or the production situation. There are like some material things that can also anchor an interpretation, as well as history and context. Um, so it isn't all just subjective. But I do think that ultimately the point is, for me, is about these more ambiguous feelings, and like feelings like joy or love or connection, that are a little harder to argue are right, or this is the right or wrong, wrong take, but to really think about why we need this art, or why it's important to so many people.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I appreciate
Sure, yeah, I hope so. But I will say, I'll just go on a little bit. I just went to a talk by one of my colleagues, Marcy Dinius, in the English department, and she is interested in publication history, and she writes about like Black radical writings by abolitionists and other folks in the 19th century. And there are things about what she's arguing and the kind of argument that she's making, that there is like I think a correct, or at least persuasive, set of interpretations and facts that she's providing, that I think is also really important and valuable. It's just not where I'm putting my own vision, I guess, right now. So
Well, one question I've been thinking about that I think is also something that's come up in this class is thinking about your audience. And it seems like from watching you through the process, like, it's always great to listen to you, because even though I talk to you every day, the way that you talk about the project also shifts. And so I think it'd be interesting I'd like to see what you have to say today about kind of like, who do you see as your audience for this project, and how has it also, I think it's sort of shifted in a way, like who you have thought about as your audience, and maybe even the way you've thought about the project. So, because one of the things that we've been thinking about is how everybody's project is in process. like what you start out with may shift as the more that you do it. So I don't know. Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Annie. Yeah, well, for the country music project, my sense of audience has really changed a lot because when I first started writing about it, I got interested in part because I was talking to my dad, who had been a studio musician in Nashville and had played percussion on these different albums as a kind of stealth black presence in like Jimmy Buffett and some other people who were really familiar. And so I was really interested in it more as a family story. And I really felt kind of alone in terms of, I was thinking like, wow, I don't know if this is something that people would be interested in at all. Then I went through a process of interviewing Black fans of country music. And then I realized that there were all these different people who were interested. As musicians themselves, or as like one friend and colleague is from Belize, and country music is really an important part of kind of the way that music is kind of multi-genre, and it's also an interesting symbol of America. Anyway, I discovered this audience that I didn't know was there by talking just to people that I knew, and then friends of friends, and then. And then I decided to do a special issue of a popular music journal with a country music scholar because I thought this is a field and there are people debating things and discussing things from an ethnomusicological perspective, or music theorists or historians, and I'm kind of stepping in naively. So maybe if I do something to work with other scholars, then I can build the scholarly audience. So I did that, as their editor. It was kind of funny to edit the work of people who were telling me totally new things. So it was a very interesting position, and one much more mutual than sometimes editor relationships can be. So that audience started widening to be more academic than I had imagined it. And then at the same time, all this really great music was happening that wasn't happening before in terms of country music, like just people pushing the envelope in terms of um, black country music in part, and also calling out the racism of the standard country music industry, in the wake of George Floyd and other folks, and also just like people getting into positions of power and bringing out some of the absences and ways that people have lost their contracts and other things like that. So there's this whole movement happening at the same time that I was writing. So what felt like this really, it still is a kind of narrow side project. And I know in the real world, not everybody is thinking about Black country music, but it is much bigger, a much bigger conversation than it started out to be when I started. But I think in general, I always write thinking about my grandmother, who was self-taught and who, she went to high school but wasn't able to go beyond high school. And she cleaned, she was a janitor at Simeon High School, and she would bring home books that people had left behind, and really loved ideas, and was really an intellectual person and would love talking. Like we would sit around and talk about movies and ideas with her. And so my ideal reader is kind of her, like someone who is open to all kinds of ideas, but who may not be excited about academic language. And I still think I nerd out a little too much, maybe for her, but I think that that's my goal, is to just to write in a way where anyone who's interested and excited could get excited and join in um, through writing whatever I'm writing. So, but I keep working on it.
Okay, other questions or thoughts or comments?
Okay, I have a question for you all. So part of my own trajectory has been like finding these classes to help me learn what I need to know. And I was thinking that, like, how do you imagine yourselves beyond DePaul, like continuing to learn? Like, what do you imagine yourself writing and thinking? And then how do you want to stay engaged with whatever, with your project, like once you're all done? Does anyone have any visions about that?
I have a like something. If I don't know if okay, yeah. So after school, I'm a junior now, finishing my women's study degree, and then I'm a double major, so I'm gonna finish psychology next year. And ideally, I would love to travel after school and explore the world that way, especially after COVID. If you know everything is safe and all that, but with tarot, like I would love to in my travels like try to find practitioners around the world and like wherever I am and like see how they practice and what it looks like for them and what their methods of like reaching an audience where they are differs in different countries, different states, or like wherever I end up going, and kind of seeing how that plays out in different areas. Yeah, that's kind of just a little bit, but I think that's something that I would love to do.
That is super cool, Annabelle. That just gave me chills. I was like, oh, that sounds really neat. When we were in Michael's the other day, we saw this. It's like a tarot card notebook where you jot down readings and stuff. And I thought, okay, if there's material on doing tarot card readings at Michael's, then something really big is going on. But anyway, I love that future idea.
Yeah.
Hey, Franny, maybe you could tell her about Sharon Bridgeforth's project.
Oh,
I haven't
yeah.
had a chance to tell her yet.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Okay, so a friend of ours who's a performance artist has a project called, I think it's called That Mermaid Man Lady. But in it, she's doing, she has a performance piece that's informed by Tara and by the Orishas, and Tara, I think a deck that is also connected to the Orishas. And but she also at one point has done she had like a series of YouTubes, which I haven't seen them, but I saw them on Facebook for a while, where she would do tarot card readings for the week and like kind of just offer them up to her community. And so she's really coming from a Black feminist queer perspective. And yeah, if you haven't encountered her yet, she's a
Oh, I
really neat
haven't.
person.
That's awesome. I see Anne put in the chat, so I will like copy that down because that's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, we looked it up the other day. So by the way, half the ideas I give any of you I've gotten from Franny. But it looked really cool. So looks like an amazing project.
She'd actually been a visiting professor here in the theater. Or was she in women's and gender studies, or was she in theater? I can't remember.
I think she was based in theater, but she worked a lot with WGS students.
Yeah, yeah, really, really
Lots of
cool.
classes and did a lot of great work.
Great work.
Really special. Okay, anyone else? Thoughts or comments? Yeah, thoughts about where you want to take your work?
I'll say a little something. I am also a psych double major, and I really want to go into doing research and stuff. So, and of course, sexual orientation is a big research interest of mine. So I'd really like to just like be a part of making bisexual people more visible in research. And I had another thought, but it just escaped me. But yeah, I was just gonna say that I really want to like, I mean, as a bisexual person myself, it's really important to me, but just, thinking of proper representation of the LGBTQ community as a whole in research and making sure that that's like a really big priority of mine throughout my career. Like that's something I want to keep, in my head all the time. So yeah.
That's really great to hear. And like I love research anyway, but whether or not you literally are writing about yourself or you just have in your mind kind of your own questions and your own commitment to those questions, I think it's really important because it's a way to stay grounded and to stay focused and to bring heart to what you're doing. So that sounds really wonderful.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else?
I could talk also, because I like the question that you asked, because I also have been thinking about like, Anne always asks us like, what's at stake when we're writing our projects, like when we're working on it, and I've been trying to think about like how I want my project to live, like what's the purpose in doing it, and like what does it mean to, yeah. So I've been thinking about like I definitely want to incorporate like artistic elements of like just like, yeah, and then I also want to have like a component where like I'm reading some of the stuff that I'm writing so that people can also like listen to it. And I also want to maybe have some of it be like a toolkit. So in that way it could live on as like a resource and not just like, yeah, as also a resource. But that's something I've been thinking about a lot. So yeah, and then also just in relation to your pieces, um, I shared them with my dad, or I shared some of the stuff with my dad, who he plays banjo and he's a country music fan. So that's another like thing of like I thought it would be interesting. He was really interested in the connections that you drew. So it was cool.
Oh, yay. Oh, I'm so glad. Here I can perform a little bit. No, I won't. I won't perform for you, but I'm really excited. And I hope he enjoyed reading. That sounds so cool. Like there's so many possibilities in terms of sharing your work, whether it's through like a podcast or in a toolkit, like ways that things can be mobile beyond um, publication and in lots of different ways. So I do think that that's a really exciting thing about this moment is all the different ways that you can connect with audiences and be in conversation with people. So
Thank
cool.
you.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think that we're at our time. It's like 2:20. So if we could all thank Franny. Thank you, Franny, for
Thanks,
everything you
everybody.
brought today. Really appreciate it. And I'll see you later. And if
Thank you.
anybody wants to,
Great being in conversation with you all. Thanks. And I'll be back. I'm back on campus in the spring. So not teaching, but I will be in my head. I'll be back. So please get in touch with me. And if you can't find me in Outlook, just ask Ann. Okay. Bye. See
bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye, Annie. See ya.
See you soon.
Thanks.
Mhm. Okay. Okay, so if you want to, maybe you could take a few minutes to write Francesca a note to thank her. That would be really nice. And then, yeah, we can close out.